Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be taking a look at To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, what a classic.
It is a classic. I think everyone has probably read this at some point, but even if you have, I think you'll find some interesting things in this deep dive as we kind of go through all the different themes.
Yeah. Scout's journey, the way she sees Maycomb, it's really something.
It is. It's like we're right there with her in Alabama, Maycomb, Alabama
Yeah,
specifically.
moving the thick of it.
With those summertime boundaries like, Mrs. Dubose's house, the Radley place. Ooh, the Radley place. Just saying, it gives me chills.
It's like from the start, Lee makes that place, the Radley place, all mysterious.
Oh, for sure.
And Boo Radley is like this almost mythical figure, like Scout, Jem, and Dill. They're obsessed. Their imaginations just go wild.
Totally. And their games, like trying to get Boo to come out, I mean, hilarious, but also kind of sad.
A little bit.
Like, think about it. They use a fishing pole with a note. They dare each other to even touch the house. It's like they're trying to reach into this unknown world, this world that Boo represents.
It's like this human thing, you know?
Yeah.
We want to understand what we don't, what's different.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's scary, but there's always this curiosity.
Okay, but Maycomb was more than just Boo Radley, right? Like, remember when Jem and Dill borrowed that car and ended up locking Mr. Connor the Beetle in the outhouse?
Oh, classic Maycomb. Like, Lee uses these little stories, these slices of life to paint this picture.
Yeah.
A charming town, but kind of quirky too.
For sure, quirky. But under all that, there's these deeper social rules, you know? The way things work in a small southern town.
Unspoken rules.
Exactly. And then there's Scout's first day at school and her clash with Miss Caroline. Oh, Miss Caroline, bless her heart. But with her strict rules, she just doesn't get Maycomb.
She's an outsider.
Totally. Like the whole thing with Walter Cunningham. Miss Caroline offers him money for lunch, right?
Right.
But she doesn't realize that for a Cunningham taking charity, that's a blow to their pride.
Yeah, it's like Lee shows us how class, social standing, they're woven into Maycomb's fabric.
Totally. And then there's Burris Ewell, the boy with the, the cootie?
Oh, yeah.
Such a sad reminder of the poverty some families face. But it also shows how we can be so blind to other people's situations just because they're from a different social class.
Assumptions, blind spots.
Yeah.
Lee makes us look at those, even in ourselves. It's like To Kill a Mockingbird. It's not just a story, it's holding up a mirror.
Whoa, that's deep. But then we have these sweet scenes with Scout learning to read with Atticus and their little pact to keep it secret from Miss Caroline.
So wholesome.
I know. It shows how Atticus encourages her love for learning, treats her as an equal.
He gets it. Real learning, it's about curiosity, exploring, talking, not just rigid rules.
So true. And what about those mysterious gifts in the Radley tree? Like, adds to the whole Boo mystery.
He's trying to connect in a way they don't understand yet.
Exactly. It's like he's reaching out. And I think it's the start of them seeing Boo differently.
Yeah, chipping away at all those fears and prejudices, they start seeing past the rumors.
Right. Okay, so we've got these adventures, these quirky characters, this mystery with Boo. But there's someone else who's really important, Miss Maudie Atkinson.
Miss Maudie. She's like the voice of reason, sees right through the town's like hypocrisy and judging.
She does. And she doesn't hold back. Like when she compares the Bible in the wrong hands to a whiskey bottle.
Ooh, chills. It's like a warning about blind faith, how religion can be twisted.
Powerful stuff. And it kind of sets us up for that big lesson Atticus teaches Scout and Jem about the mockingbirds.
It's a sin to kill a mockingbird. Such a simple line, but so much weight.
Right. It becomes this metaphor, this symbol for anyone who's innocent, who's targeted unfairly.
Mockingbirds, they don't hurt anyone. They just sing, bring joy. That's what makes them so vulnerable.
And that brings us to, I think, the core of the book, Tom Robinson's trial.
Ooh, yeah. Here we face, like, the raw reality of prejudice and how it twists justice.
Totally. Tom, a black man, is accused of raping Mayella Ewell, a white woman. And it feels like the moment the accusation is made, the town's already decided. Just because of the color of his skin, it's infuriating, especially knowing that Atticus is going to prove Tom innocent.
But it's like, will it even matter? That's the question.
Right. Such a heavy question. Atticus takes the case knowing it's an uphill battle, not just against the Ewells, but against, like, the whole system.
A system built on prejudice.
Exactly. And his closing argument, I mean, wow, legendary.
Powerful.
It's like this perfect blend of logic, reason, appealing to the jury's humanity. For a second, you think, maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
But then the verdict, guilty. Like a punch to the gut.
It's like a punch in the gut.
It shows you how strong prejudice can be,
Yeah.
how it can overpower evidence, logic, everything. And for Jem and Scout, it's devastating. They see their dad, their hero, fight for what's right and still lose.
Innocence shattered. They're forced to see how dark the world can be.
It's a turning point for them, and it gets even worse when Tom is killed trying to escape prison.
A devastating loss.
Atticus tells Jem it was a little too strong for him, talking about the weight of, like, the white man's world, crushing Tom's hope. It shows the impact, the crushing impact of prejudice.
It's not just individuals. It's a whole system, a world that can extinguish hope.
So powerful yet so sad. But Miss Maudie, she gives us a glimmer of hope. She tells Jem, people like Atticus who fight for what's right, even when it seems impossible, they're the ones who make a difference.
Yeah, courage isn't about winning every battle.
Right.
It's about fighting for what you believe in, no matter what. So Atticus defending Tom, that was a victory, even if the verdict said otherwise.
Totally. But the story doesn't end there. Bob Ewell, he's vengeful, he's dangerous, and he's out there. It creates this sense of, like, unease, like something bad is coming.
A shadow hanging over them.
Yeah, like a shadow. And then Halloween night, Jem and Scout walking home from the school pageant, and they're attacked.
Ooh, that scene. So much tension. Lee's descriptions, the darkness, the rustling leaves, the sudden violence. Terrifying.
It's like your heart stops when you realize they're in danger, and then out of the darkness, this figure, their savior. And who is it? Boo Radley.
The recluse, the one they were afraid of, becomes the hero.
It's like everything you thought you knew about Boo just flipped. He's the protector, not the monster.
Yeah, Lee, she's so smart. She makes us face our own prejudices, how we judge people based on, like, looks or gossip.
Makes you think, how many Boo Radleys are out there, you know? Misunderstood, judged, pushed aside because of what? Fear.
It's a powerful message about empathy. Seeing beyond the surface and recognizing everyone's worth.
And it's not just Boo. Think about Dill, coming to Maycomb every summer. That quirky kid with his imagination running wild, coming from a broken home, always craving attention.
He's searching for belonging.
He is. And his fascination with Boo, it's almost like he sees himself in Boo. The outsider, the misunderstood.
Ooh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that.
Right. It makes you see Dill differently, not just some mischievous kid. He's dealing with stuff, you know, complex emotions,
Right.
looking for connection in a world that doesn't quite get him.
It shows how good Lee is at creating these characters. Relatable, but also complex, full of contradictions.
Okay, but let's talk about Scout. She's the heart of this story, right? And her journey, it's amazing, starts as this tomboy, headstrong, but by the end, she's grown so much.
Her experiences in school, out of school, it's all part of her education, her real education. Learning about class, prejudice, relationships.
It's true. And she faces it all with this, like, mix of curiosity, bravery, and heart.
And compassion.
Compassion, yeah. It's inspiring to see her grow, even with all the tough stuff she sees, like the trial.
She doesn't shy away from it. She faces it head on. Tries to understand this world that's so confusing and sometimes unfair.
And it's through Scout's eyes that we see that courtroom drama unfold.
It's like the whole of Maycomb society is in that courtroom. All his prejudices and social rules right there on display.
It's like you're watching this slow-motion train wreck. You know it's coming, the verdict's almost set. But you're still hoping. Maybe somehow.
But then that guilty verdict,
Yeah.
it's like a slap in the face.
It really is. It shows you how powerful, how blinding prejudice can be. And for Atticus, man, even knowing the odds, he still fights. Not just for Tom, but for Jem and Scout, for his principles.
He's the definition of moral courage.
Yeah.
Standing up for what's right, even when everyone's against you.
Yeah.
Even when it seems like there's no hope.
And he teaches Jem and Scout this crucial lesson about integrity and never giving up on what's right.
Yeah, no matter the cost.
Right. And it's not just in the courtroom. Remember when he shoots that mad dog, Tim Johnson?
Oh, yeah.
It seems small, but it says so much about him. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't boast. Just does what needs to be done.
Quiet heroism?
Quiet heroism, exactly. Yeah. Taking responsibility even when it's dangerous. And it's the same with defending Tom. In both cases, there's a threat.
Right.
With the dog, it's physical. With Tom, it's this moral danger. Like, Lee's showing us how prejudice itself is dangerous.
It poisons, divides, tears apart communities.
And that's why Atticus is so important. He represents hope, reason, the possibility of a better world. He reminds us to fight injustice, to speak up, to protect the vulnerable.
To be the change you want to see.
Exactly. But let's be honest, Atticus, he's not perfect.
No.
He has blind spots, especially about how deep racism runs in Maycomb.
That's true. He's idealistic, believes in reason and fairness winning out.
Yeah.
But Maycomb, maybe even the world itself, it's not that simple.
It's like he underestimates how powerful prejudice is, how it can twist the truth.
And that makes the story even sadder. Even the best intentions can be defeated by the system.
It's like Jem and Scout are seeing the world through Atticus's eyes, but also their own.
Wow.
And those views, they don't always match up.
Yeah, it's a lot for kids to handle. They have to figure out their own moral compass.
Right. Figure out their own way in a world that's full of contradictions and hypocrisies.
And it's by questioning, wrestling with those hard truths, that they grow. They learn the world isn't black and white. Good and evil can be in the same person, and sometimes even good intentions aren't enough.
Tom Robinson's death, the attack on Jem and Scout, they leave scars.
Deep scars.
But they also show how resilient humans can be.
Resilience.
That even in darkness, there's hope, there's compassion.
And sometimes that hope, it comes from the least expected places. Like Boo Radley, stepping out of the shadows to protect those kids.
It makes you realize heroism isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's quiet, those small acts of kindness.
Standing up for what's right, even when no one's looking.
Being decent when the world's telling you to be something else.
And those small acts, those moments of empathy, they make a difference. They might not change everything, but they ripple outwards. They inspire, they remind us that even in the darkest times,
there's still light.
there's still light.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the characters, but let's shift gears a bit. Talk about education.
Ooh, good one. Lee shows us different kinds of education. The formal kind, at school, but also this deeper kind, from life, from experiences, from just watching and thinking.
And Atticus, as a dad, he's amazing at this.
Life education.
Yes. He doesn't lecture. He talks to them, asks questions, makes them think about the world around them.
He feeds their curiosity, encourages them to be fair, to be just. He's a role model, not just by what he says, but by what he does.
And To Kill a Mockingbird, the book itself, it's a kind of education too, isn't it?
It is. It makes us, as readers, face things about ourselves, about society, about history that are uncomfortable. It makes us examine our own biases, question what we think we know, and try to see things from other perspectives.
It's like a masterclass in empathy, a reminder that to build a better, fairer world, we need to understand each other.
And that's just as important today as it was when the book was written, maybe even more so.
So true. But education isn't just about facts, right? It's about developing this.
This lens, this way of seeing that allows us to challenge what's wrong, to question authority, to speak truth to power.
Yes. And Atticus, he instills that in his kids, to think for themselves, to question, to stand up for what they believe in.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard, yeah. And he encourages them to read, to explore different ideas, to be open to things that might challenge their beliefs. Real education, it's about expanding, pushing your boundaries, always learning.
And that's for all of us. Doesn't matter how old you are, what your background is. To Kill a Mockingbird, it reminds us that education, it's a journey that never ends. And it's on that journey that we become better, more informed, more compassionate people.
Okay, so we've got education, but there's another theme that's tied to it. Social class. In Maycomb, it's like there's this ladder, the wealthy and powerful at the top and the poor and marginalized at the bottom.
And Lee shows us how class, race, and gender, they all intersect to create systems of oppression, of inequality.
Like the Cunninghams. They're poor, white farmers struggling, but they have this fierce pride.
And Atticus respects them. He gets it. Poverty doesn't mean you're less of a person.
And he helps Walter, Scout's classmate, to navigate that whole social maze of Maycomb.
It's subtle,
Yeah.
but it shows how empathy, compassion, they can breach those divides. But then you've got the Ewells, the absolute bottom rung, uneducated, poor, full of resentment.
Bob, he's just awful. He's like the embodiment of everything prejudiced and ignorant in Maycomb.
And his actions, they have tragic consequences.
They do. The Ewells, they show how poverty can be exploited, how the vulnerable are the ones who suffer the most. And it makes us ask, what's our responsibility? Do we perpetuate systems that keep people trapped, or do we try to create a world where everyone has a chance?
Big questions. To Kill a Mockingbird forces us to face them.
Questions that are just as relevant today. We can't ignore those who are struggling.
We can't.
We have to speak up, fight for those who don't have a voice, work towards a world where everyone has basic rights, basic opportunities.
And it's not just about charity. It's about changing the system, fixing the root causes of poverty and inequality, creating a society where everyone has a shot.
And that brings us back to education.
Close circle.
Yeah. Education can be this tool to empower, to break down those barriers of poverty and prejudice.
To build a fairer world.
Exactly. But it's not just formal education. It's access to information, it's critical thinking, it's questioning assumptions and challenging the way things are.
It's believing that you can make a difference, that you can shape your own life, your community, your future.
And that's the legacy of To Kill a Mockingbird. It challenges us to be better, to think deeper, to act with courage and compassion. It's a reminder that even in darkness, the human spirit.
It perseveres.
It perseveres. And sometimes that hope, it comes from the least expected places. Like Boo Radley stepping out of the shadows to protect those kids. It makes you realize heroism isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's quiet, those small acts of kindness.
Standing up for what's right, even when no one's looking. Being decent when the world's telling you to be something else. And those small acts, those moments of empathy, they make a difference. They might not change everything, but they ripple outwards. They inspire, they remind us that even in the darkest times, there's still light.
Okay, but let's be real. The book has its controversies. Some people say its portrayal of race and racism is, well, problematic, that it reinforces, not challenges, white supremacy.
It's a valid point, and one that's worth thinking about. But we have to remember when the book was written, and that every author, even someone as talented as Harper Lee, has their own limitations, their own perspective.
It's like we're all products of our time, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to escape those influences.
It is, but I think To Kill a Mockingbird, even with its flaws, it still has this powerful message about empathy, understanding, and having the guts to stand up against injustice. And those messages, they're still important today.
Oh, absolutely. We're still fighting for racial equality, for social justice, for basic human rights.
Exactly. So, yeah, we should talk about the book's limitations, but we should also recognize its strengths and the impact it's had.
And maybe the best way to honor Harper Lee is to keep having those tough conversations, to challenge our own biases, to work towards a world where justice and compassion win.
Because that's what To Kill a Mockingbird is all about. Being better, kinder, more understanding.
You know, as we were talking about the trial, it made me think of Atticus and the Mad Dog.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, in both cases, there's this feeling of danger, like something terrible is about to happen.
Yeah, I see that. With the Mad Dog, it's physical, a real threat to everyone.
But with the trial, it's more like a moral danger, the sickness in Maycomb itself.
And Atticus, he faces both head-on. He's willing to risk everything, his safety, his reputation, to protect others.
And even though he might lose, he still fights. Because it's the right thing to do.
It shows how much courage it takes to stand up for what you believe in, especially when everyone else is against you.
And that's a lesson Jem and Scout really learned, seeing their dad's dedication to justice.
And it's not just Atticus. Miss Maudie, too. She's another example of moral courage.
Oh, totally. She speaks her mind, she challenges the hypocrisy, she stands by Atticus when everyone else turns away.
And she does it with such grace, such dignity.
She's like this light in all the darkness.
She is.
Yeah.
And she reminds us that even when things are tough, there are always people who will fight for what's right.
And those people, they're the ones who make a difference.
They do. And, you know, as we're talking about these characters with moral courage, it strikes me that they're often the ones who are misunderstood, the ones who society pushes to the margin.
Oh, for sure. Like Boo Radley, he's an outcast. People fear him, avoid him.
But he ends up being the most compassionate, the bravest person in the whole story.
He's the one who saves the kids, even though it puts him at risk.
And that makes us question who we think of as heroes.
Exactly. It's like real heroism can come from anywhere.
It can. And that's so important today with all the talk about social justice and inequality.
We're so quick to judge, to stereotype, without really knowing people's stories.
And that leads to prejudice, to discrimination, to injustice.
So To Kill a Mockingbird is asking us to look deeper, to see the humanity in everyone.
To remember that everyone deserves compassion and respect, no matter their race, their class, their background.
And that's a timeless message.
It is. And, you know, talking about seeing the human in everyone, it makes me think about childhood innocence in the novel.
Oh, yeah. Scout and Jem, they start out so wide-eyed, curious, full of adventure.
But as the story unfolds, they're exposed to the harsh realities of the world.
They see racism, prejudice, violence, a good man die. It's tough.
It is.
And those experiences, they force them to face the complexities of good and evil, the flaws in the justice system, the limits of what they understand.
It's a painful process.
It is.
But it's necessary.
Necessary for them to grow up.
Exactly. Because, like Atticus teaches them, growing up means seeing the world as it is, not how we want it to be.
And having the courage to face those truths, to challenge what's wrong, to fight for better.
And even though they lose their innocence, Scout and Jem, they keep their hope, their compassion.
They learn to live in those gray areas, to see that good and evil can be mixed up, that even when things are dark, there's still a chance for redemption.
And that redemption, it often comes from unexpected places, like Boo Radley. He's the perfect example of misunderstood goodness.
He is a quiet hero, protecting the innocent. His actions, they're more powerful than words.
And he shows that change is possible, that even in a place filled with prejudice, there are people who will stand up for what's right.
And that's a message we need to hear even today.
We do, because we all have that capacity for both darkness and light inside us.
And our choices, they determine who we become.
Well said. That's what makes this book so timeless. It forces us to face hard truths, to look at our own biases, to think about how we can be better people.
Okay, we've talked about perspective, empathy, courage, good and evil, growing up, and community. But there's one more thing I want to touch on, community.
Yes. Maycomb, it has its problems, but in the end, it's a community that pulls together.
Like after the fire at Miss Maudie's, everyone comes to help, to comfort her.
Even with all the divisions, the racial tensions, there's this sense of shared history, shared values, a responsibility to look after each other.
And you see that especially during Tom Robinson's trial.
Yeah. Even with the pressure to conform, there are people who stand up for what they believe is right.
Like Miss Maudie speaking out against the hypocrisy, and Mr. Underwood protecting Atticus and Tom from the mob.
They might not change the verdict, but they show the power of conscience, of standing up for what's right even when it's unpopular.
And in the end, it's the community that helps Jem and Scout to heal after the trial and Bob Ewell's attack.
Boo Radley comes out of the shadows to save them, and Mr. Tate covers up the truth to protect Boo.
And yeah, you could argue about whether that was right legally, but it shows the compassion, the sense of community that runs deeper than all the social divisions.
It's a reminder that even when things are tough, human connection, support, they can be powerful forces for healing.
Okay, we've covered so much perspective, empathy, courage, human nature, growing up, and community. But there's one more thing I want to talk about, storytelling itself.
Yes. Storytelling is the heart of To Kill a Mockingbird. It's through Scout's voice that we experience everything, that we understand the characters.
And Scout, she's a natural storyteller, isn't she? She notices everything. She's witty. She gets people.
And Lee captures the way people talk in the South, the rhythm, the expressions. It brings the characters and the setting to life.
And she uses language to create these vivid pictures, to make you feel things, to challenge the way you think.
Remember Atticus's closing argument? So powerful. It's a lesson in how to use words to persuade, to inspire, to move people to action.
Exactly. And language also reveals character. Think about how Bob Ewell talks, crude, hateful, compared to Atticus, who's measured, eloquent.
Their words show their values, their beliefs, who they really are.
So To Kill a Mockingbird, it reminds us how powerful words are. They can be used for good or bad, to connect or divide.
It's a call to be careful with our own words, to use them to build bridges, not walls, to encourage empathy, not prejudice.
To create a world where we understand each other.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about perspective, empathy, courage, good and evil, growing up, and community. But there's one more thing I want to touch on, storytelling itself.
Yes. Storytelling is the heart of To Kill a Mockingbird. It's through Scout's voice that we experience everything, that we understand the characters.
And Scout, she's a natural storyteller, isn't she? She notices everything, she's witty, she gets people. And Lee captures the way people talk in the South, the rhythm, the expressions, it brings the characters and the setting to life. And she uses language to create these vivid pictures, to make you feel things, to challenge the way you think.
Remember Atticus's closing argument, so powerful. It's a lesson in how to use words to persuade, to inspire, to move people to action. And language also reveals character. Think about how Bob Ewell talks, crude, hateful, compared to Atticus, who's measured, eloquent. Their words show their values, their beliefs, who they really are.
So, To Kill a Mockingbird, it reminds us how powerful words are. They can be used for good or bad, to connect or divide.
It's a call to be careful with our own words, to use them to build bridges, not walls, to encourage empathy, not prejudice, to create a world where we understand each other.
And as we're talking about storytelling, it hits me that To Kill a Mockingbird is a story about stories itself.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Well, think about all the stories that flit around Maycomb. The rumors about Boo, the gossip about the Ewells, the talk about Atticus defending Tom.
Right. Those stories, they shape how people see things, how they act.
And they show how powerful a narrative can be to create understanding or misunderstanding, empathy or prejudice.
And Lee's challenging us to be smart about the stories we hear, to question them, to think about who's telling them and why, to look for different viewpoints.
Because too often, we just believe what we hear without checking, without thinking about the consequences.
And that can be dangerous, leading to stereotypes, to injustice, to silencing people.
So, To Kill a Mockingbird, it's a reminder to be careful with the stories we tell, to understand their power, to use our own voices to make the world better.
And speaking of stories, it makes me think about memory in the novel.
Oh, yeah. Scout's telling us her memories, trying to make sense of her childhood and what happened.
And those memories, they're both personal and shared. They reflect Maycomb's history and culture.
And they show how the past shapes the present. It influences who we are, our relationships, how we see the world.
And Lee's making us think about those memories, to question them, to see how they affect our views today.
Because sometimes we get stuck in the past, or we let it limit us.
So, To Kill a Mockingbird, it encourages us to be honest about our memories, to recognize their flaws, and to use them to learn and grow.
As we talk about memory in the past, it strikes me that this book itself has become a kind of memory for a lot of people.
That's so true. So many people have read it, generations of students.
And the characters, the themes, they've become symbols of the South, of the fight for racial justice.
And its message of empathy, compassion, courage, it still resonates with people.
It really does.
And that's the power of literature. It goes beyond time and place. It connects us through shared experiences. It inspires us to create a better world.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Perspective, empathy, moral courage, human nature, innocence, community, storytelling, and memory.
Wow, we have. Lee's woven all these ideas together to create such a rich story, a story that still speaks to us today.
But there's one more thing I want to touch on, the power of language itself.
Ah, yes. Language is the building block of storytelling, and Lee, she uses it like a master.
Think about Scout's voice. So authentic, full of wonder, but also becoming more aware of how complex the world is.
And Lee captures how people talk in the South. The rhythm, the slang, it brings everything to life.
And she uses language to paint pictures, to make you feel, to challenge your thinking.
Atticus's closing argument, remember?
Oh, yeah.
It's a perfect example. A passionate call for justice, a condemnation of prejudice.
It shows how words can persuade, inspire, make you want to do something.
And language shows his character. Like the difference between Bob Ewell's words, so crude, hateful, and Atticus's, so carefully chosen, so eloquent.
Their words tell us everything about them, their values, their humanity.
They do. So To Kill a Mockingbird reminds us how powerful language is. It can be used for good or for evil, for understanding or division.
It reminds us to be careful what we say.
To use our words to connect, not separate, to encourage empathy, not hate.
To create a world where communication brings understanding and compassion. It's wild how a book this old can still hit so hard, Like we're still fighting the same fights. Prejudice, justice, trying to balance hope with how messed up things can be.
It's because Lee's themes, they're universal. Maycomb, it might be made up, but those struggles, they're human struggles, no matter where you are, what time you live in. And that's what makes it so powerful. It reminds us we're all connected. This fight for justice, it's ongoing. And every generation, it has to pick up the torch.
One thing we haven't really talked about are the women in Maycomb.
Oh, good point.
They might not be making the laws or arguing in court, but they have this quiet strength that shapes everything.
Totally, like Miss Maudie. She doesn't have an official title.
No.
People respect her. She's wise, independent, and she always does what's right.
She calls out hypocrisy, she stands up to the powerful, and she's there for Jem and Scout, helping them figure things out.
Exactly. And Calpurnia, the Finch's housekeeper. She's more than just an employee. She's family. She's a mother figure to those kids. She keeps things steady, and she's a link between the white and black communities.
She's strong, resilient, and she handles the racism in Maycomb with so much grace.
And she sees things differently. She challenges those social rules. And don't forget Scout, trying to find her way as a young woman in a society that wants to put her in a box.
Right. She pushes back against all that. She's a tomboy. She questions those gender roles. She makes her own path.
It shows that even in a rigid system, you can still challenge things, define yourself, create new possibilities.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it hits me that To Kill a Mockingbird, it's not just a story, it's a call to action.
Yes, it's making us look at our own towns, our own lives, and ask those hard questions.
About prejudice, about justice, about seeing things from other people's shoes.
And it reminds us that we all have a part to play in making the world better. It's not about being some big hero. It's about the little choices we make, how we treat people, how we speak up for what's right, how we stand against what's wrong, even when it's tough, even when it makes people mad.
And that's what makes it so powerful. It leaves you feeling like you gotta do something.
You can't just sit back and watch. You gotta get involved, speak up, fight for those who need help, push for a better future.
And that fight, it doesn't stop when you close the book. It's in our lives, in our communities, in every decision we make. To Kill a Mockingbird, it's a guide, a reminder, but it's up to us to take that message and run with it.
To make it real.
So as we finish up, I hope you can see those connections between Maycomb and your world. Find the Boo Radleys in your life, fight those prejudices, be a force for good, and never stop questioning, learning, growing.
This deep dive, it's just the start. There's always more to discover in the book and in yourself.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.